Hello children, today we will continue with the chapter The Age of Industrialization. Children, in the last video we saw that the weavers in India could not compete with the showy Manchester goods. Then how did they survive? Well, we can find an answer in this video. The first cotton mill in Bombay came up in 1854. By 1862, 4 mills were at work with 94,000 spindles and 2,150 looms. Around the same time, jute mills came up in Bengal, the first being set up in 1855. In North India, the Algan mill was started in Kanpur in the 1860s, and a year later, the first cotton mill of Ahmedabad was set up. By 1874, the first spinning and weaving mill of Madras began production. Now, who had set up the industry? Industries were set up in different regions by different people. Let us see who they were. From the late 18th century, British in India began exporting opium to China. Many Indians became junior players in this trade, providing finance, procuring supplies, and shipping consignments. Having earned through trade, some of these businessmen had visions of developing industrial enterprises in India. In Bengal, Dwarkanath Tagore set up 6 joint stock companies in the 1830s and 1840s. In Bombay, Parsis like Dinshu Pete and Jamsetji Nusratwanji Tata built huge industrial empires. Seth Hukum Chand set up the first Indian jute mill in Calcutta in 1970. So did the father as well as grandfather of the famous industrialist G.D. Birla. Children, how did these early entrepreneurs accumulate their capital for investment? First, some merchants from Madras traded with Burma. Others had links with the Middle East and East Africa. Second, other commercial groups operated within India, carrying goods from one place to another, banking money, transferring funds between cities and financing traders. Now children, let's see what were the hurdles in the path of Indian entrepreneurs. First, colonial control over Indian trade tightened the space within which Indian merchants could function became increasingly limited. Second, they were barred from trading with Europe in manufacturing goods and had to export mostly raw material and food grains. Third, European managing agencies controlled a large sector of Indian industries. These agencies mobilized capital, set up joint stock companies and managed them. Fourth, the European merchant industrialists had their own chambers of commerce, which Indian businessmen were not allowed to join. Where did the workers come from for working in these factories? In most industrial regions, workers came from the districts around. Peasants and artisans who found no work in the village went to the industrial centers in search of work. Most often mill workers moved between the village and the city, returning to their village homes during harvest and festivals. Workers traveled great distance in the hope of work in the mills. From the United Provinces, they went to work in the textile mills of Bombay and in the jute mills of Calcutta. Now, children, let's see who is a jobber and what was its need. Getting jobs was always difficult. The numbers seeking work were always more than the jobs available. Entry into the mills was also restricted. So, industrialists usually employed a jobber to get new recruits. He got people from his village, ensured that jobs, helped them settle in the city and provided them money in times of crisis. Next, we move to the topic, the peculiarities, that is the unusual features of industrial growth. European managing agencies established tea and coffee plantations, acquiring land at cheap rates from the colonial government, and they invested in mining, indigo and jute. Second, Indian businessmen avoided competing with Manchester goods, produced coarse cotton yarn rather than fabric yarn produced in Indian spinning mills was used by handloom weavers in India or exported to China. Third, when the Swadeshi movement gathered momentum, industrial groups organized themselves to protect their collective interest, pressurizing the government to increase tariff protection and grant other concessions. Fourth, from 1906, industrialists in India began shifting from yarn to cloth production. Cotton pieces goods production in India doubled between 1900 and 1912. Now, children, we will discuss about impact of First World War on Indian industries. With British mills busy with war production to meet the needs of the army, Indian mills had a vast home market to supply. As the demand in England went up, Indian factories were called upon to supply war needs. New factories were set up and old ones run multiply shifts. Many new workers were employed and anyone was made to work longer hours. Over the years, industrial production boomed. After the war, Manchester could never recapture its old position in the Indian market. Cotton production collapsed and exports of cotton cloth from Britain fell dramatically. Within the colonies, local industrialists gradually consolidated their position, substituting foreign manufacturers and capturing the home market. Now, children, we will discuss about the predominance of small-scale industries. While factory industries grew steadily after the war, large industries formed only a small segment of the economy. Small-scale production continued to predominate. Only a small proportion of the total industrial labor force worked in registered factories. The rest worked in small workshops and household units. Handicrafts production actually expanded in the 20th century, while cheap machine-made thread wiped out the spinning industry in the 19th century. The weavers survived despite problems. In the 20th century, handloom cloth production expanded steadily. Almost traveling between 1900s and 1940. By the second decade of the 20th century, we find weavers using looms with a fly shuttle. This increased productivity per worker, speeded up production and reduced labor demand. Certain groups of weavers were in the better position than others to survive the competition with mill industries. How was this possible, children? Let's see. The coarser cloth was bought by the poor and its demand fluctuated violently. The demand for the finer varieties brought by the well-to-do was more stable. The rich could buy these even when the poor starved. Famines did not affect the sale of Banarsi or Balucheri saris. Mills could not imitate specialized weaves. Saris with woven borders or the famous lungis and handkerchiefs of Madras could not be easily displaced by mill production. Weavers and other craftspeople who continued to expand production through the 20th century did not necessarily prosper. They lived hard lives and worked long hours, but they were not simply remnants of past times in the age of factories. Their life and labor was integral to the process of industrialization. Children, it simply means that these weavers were not just remains of the past. Their life and their work were invisible part of industrialization. Children, we have seen how British manufacturers attempted to take over the Indian market and how Indian weavers and craftsmen traders and industrialists resisted colonial controls, demanded tariff protection, created their own space, and tried to extend the market for their products. But when new products are produced, people have to be convinced to buy them. They have to feel like using the product. How was this done? So, now we will see the measures adopted by the producers in India to expand the market for their goods in the 19th century. First, advertisements made products appear desirable and necessary. They tried to shape the minds of people and create new goods. From the very beginning of the industrial age, advertisements have played a part in the expanding the markets for products and in shaping a new consumer culture. Secondly, when Manchester industrialists began selling clothes in India, they put labels on the cloth bundles. When buyers saw "Made in Manchester" written in bold in the label, they were expected to feel confident about buying the cloth. Labels also carried images and were very often beautifully illustrated. Images of Indian gods and goddesses regularly appeared on these labels. It was as if the association with gods gave divine approval. The goods being sold was also intended to make the manufacturer from a foreign land appear somewhat familiar to Indian people. By the late 19th century, manufacturers were printing calendars to popularize their product. Now children, why did they resort to use calendars for advertisement purpose? The answer is, unlike newspapers and magazines, calendars were used even by people who could not read. They were hung in tea shops and in poor people's homes just as much as in offices and middle class apartments. Like the images of gods, figures of important personages of emperors and nawabs adorned advertisement and calendars. The messages: if you respect the royal figures, then respect this product. When the product was being used by kings or produced under royal command, its quality could not be questioned. When Indian manufacturers advertised, the nationalist message was clear and loud. If you care for the nation, then buy products that Indians produce. Advertisements became a vehicle of the nationalist message of Swadeshi. So, children, what can be concluded from the chapter? We see that the age of industries meant major technological changes, growth of factories, and the making of a new industrial labor force. However, hand technology and small-scale production remain an important part of the industrial landscape. With this, we come to an end of the chapter.
हेलो दोस्तों, हमारे इस चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करने के लिए यहाँ क्लिक कीजिए। थैंक यू।